In previous videos, we have successfully tried on the lives of World War I soldiers and Roman legionnaires. Why not travel to the East, the home of gunpowder, Bushido, and anime? Today, there will be no European mess. We will live one day in the life of a Japanese samurai. And along the way, we'll debunk a couple of myths, learn about their lives, and of course, analyze the movie 47 Ronin starring Keanu Reeves. Welcome our samurai Shinji. The year is 1610. And Shinji is an average samurai of the approximately 400,000 samurai of that era. He serves as daimyo near the castle Gitsi, located in the Hyogyo prefecture. Shinji's task is a piece of cake. He guards the master's castle, a job that already exists in Europe and has been called a guard for ages. But we're in Japan, and here, Shinji is a samurai, even though he belongs to the lowest class. A little above him is the daimyo, also a samurai, but he manages both the castle and the small surrounding towns. A daimyo's disposal are anywhere between 100 and a couple thousand samurai like our Shinji. In turn, the daimyo, like hundreds of others like him, unquestionably obey the shogun, the main samurai and ruler of Japan. At the moment, this is the legendary Tokugawa Ieyasu, who put an end to feudal wars and gathered all the power in his hands. There were also a lot of in-between classes, like flag bearers, Baishin, but we won't focus on them in detail, and instead, we'll assume a simplified hierarchy. On Shinji is a light armor and a bow, because contrary to popular belief, not all samurai wore plate armor and wielded two swords. This was the job of swordsmen, but there were both ordinary and mounted archers along with infantry. The samurai art of archery still lives in Japan, and many competitions between archers are held till this day. This art is called hyujutsu, and until the 16th century was praised even more than the ability to wield a sword. But of course, Shinji also has a traditional katana. To be more precise, two of them, because the samurai as a privileged class carried two swords. The familiar katana was accompanied by a small wakizashi blade that was usually worn on the belt. Even when the Tokugawa shogun banned the public from carrying weapons, samurai could still carry two swords wherever they pleased. As you may have already figured, all power is actually concentrated in the hands of the samurai. And if you're thinking that they were the dominant class in Japan at that time, you are absolutely right. Officially, Tokugawa divided the country into four classes: samurai, peasants, artisans, and merchants. But it was also written in black and white that the samurai were given a special role standing above the rest. Mainly, it was expressed in the so-called right to kill and leave. Any samurai, from the shogun to our guard Shinji, had the right to execute a member of another class who did not show proper respect. Offended by anything, a samurai could kill a person on the spot and without any trial. They killed for as little as a glance, and that happened so often that it stopped surprising ordinary workers. Any Japanese who held the title of samurai was a true warrior. Both the shogun and our Shinji were raised the same way. Since childhood, they were read legends about samurai, taught Buddhist indifference toward death, and built a real cult of bravery and courage, and also conditioned them to unquestioning obedience to their master. In the past, before the samurai became a separate class, they were actually feudal lords. They lived the lives of the rich in their mansions, bossing around thousands of peasants. But these same masters, at the first call of their master, put on armor, forgot about their power, and went to battle. It's a bit like medieval Europe with its vassals, isn't it? Of course, a commoner could not become a samurai. To get the title, not only was it required to be born into a family belonging to the dynasty, but also to go through severe trials. For example, our Shinji's father once ordered him to spend several nights in the cemetery to strengthen his courage and spirit. Also, he constantly took his son to public executions and night inspections of the severed heads of criminals. And this is a mandatory stage. A young samurai must leave his mark on their heads to prove that he was there and pass the training stage. Shinji, like thousands of future samurai, was starved, forced to walk barefoot in the snow and work for days without sleep. It was believed that this toughened the spirit and fostered humility. But the main thing that made samurai like no other was unquestioning compliance with Bushido, the code of rules and norms of Japanese warriors. People often compare it to the code of knights, and this is a mistake. For knights, the code was unwritten, and the rules often were opposite from those the samurai had. For example, attacking an opponent unexpectedly from behind was common for samurai because the main goal was to win. But any knight, on the other hand, would consider it an insult. Of course, Bushido was violated, and the story that any violator committed suicide is a pure myth. If that were to be true, the samurai species would quickly die out. Demonstrative suicides were rare, and more often the samurai simply lost respect. Our Shinji is a good guy and doesn't break Bushido. Does that mean he is protected from potential suicide? According to the Codex, Shinji's life belongs to a daimyo, a higher-ranking samurai. And if daimyo is killed and the shogun, an even higher-up samurai, did not issue any commands, all the daimyo samurai committed ritual suicide by junshi. However, these cases were rare. The daimyo died only in battle together with his army, so Shinji is mostly protected from sudden death. But what kind of money does he live off of? We've got bad news. There is no point in counting how much rice Shinji could buy with his salary, since Shinji receives his salary in rice. Despite the fact that there were both gold and silver coins in Japan at that time, most of the salaries, taxes, and other payments were paid in rice. In some regions, they accepted one currency, in some another. So rice became a universal currency measured in so-called koku. It was assumed that 1 koku is the amount of rice that a person can live on for 1 year. 1 koku approximately weighed 150 kilograms or 400 grams of rice a day. Not much, is it? By the way, this measure works in Japan even in modern times, although now it is equated to 180 liters. But it's not so bad for our Shinji. As an ordinary warrior Ashigaru, he received about 20 to 30 koku a year. The income of his daimyo could reach up to 1 million koku a year. And more successful than Shinji, samurai like the administration of the daimyo received about 100 koku. Is this too much or too little? We will try to convert all this into money, which, as we have already mentioned, was different everywhere, and the samurai themselves chose which to buy and what to do with them. Take the most popular coin issued by the main Tokugawa house. It was called oban, and in 1600, 1 oban was equal to somewhere around 30 to 40 koku. So roughly rounding up, Shinji earned 1 oban a year. By the way, many of you might be familiar with oban. There is a reference to it in Pokemon, the legendary anime. The real oban was shaped like Pokemon Meowth's head. Shinji gets 1. This is 10 kobans or ryo, 2 types of smaller coins. Fortunately, we have found a document listing the prices of this era in ryo. Remember that Shinji has 10 per year and about 0.8 per month. And take a look at what you could buy for 1 ryo. The list is shocking. This equates to 750 trips to the bathhouse, 214 trips to the barber, 158 watermelons, 278 books, 30 nights in a hotel, or 43 liters of sake. Also, 1 ryo is 1,500 dangos on a stick, 140 kilograms of meat, or 250 trips to the theater. Even if we made a mistake and Shinji actually got half as much, it would still mean that he could buy 150 pairs of sandals a month. In general, it makes sense. Keep in mind that our guy is in the lower rank, but a samurai nonetheless, and they were supposed to train at least 4 hours a day and be constantly trimmed, well-groomed, and smelling nice. Bushido implies that a samurai should be a role model for everyone, so Shinji's beauty cost quite a bit. If everything is so great, where did the Ronin from the movie with Keanu Reeves come from? Actually, we've already briefly mentioned them. Literally, Ronin means a samurai without a master, which contradicts the very essence of Bushido. Ronin was anyone without a master. Doesn't matter how they ended up this way. Maybe their master was killed, maybe went bankrupt and couldn't pay. And sometimes, the samurai himself told their boss to F off, becoming free. Although Bushido does not allow this possibility, in the real world, things rarely happen as they do on paper. As a result, the government even introduced a special right of 7 leaves and 8 returns, so that freedom-loving samurai could periodically leave the master and return. If our Shinji at some point loses his master, he will turn into a Ronin, and this is a sad fate. Other samurai hate them, and many even envy them. The Ronin were always persecuted, and people made up stories about them, making them look like cannibals. But more often than not, the Ronin became bounty hunters, mercenaries, or even merchants. No one prevented the guys from going into business, although most of them did not leave the path of the samurai. This is what the movie 47 Ronin shows, and it is based on a true story. In 1701, Daimyo Asano was sentenced to seppuku for attacking a samurai close to the shogun, Kira. As a result, 47 subordinates of the daimyo, the same ordinary samurai like our Shinji, suddenly turned into Ronin. The situation was unusual, and it was stupid to ask the guys to commit ritual suicide, so everyone gave up on them. and the newly minted Ronin decided to follow Bushido till the end and to arrange a ritual and rightful revenge for their master. The guys made Kira let his guard down by pretending that they were drunk, married, and happy with the Ronin life. On the contrary, they planned their revenge, which they successfully carried out in 1703. As a result, the shogun faced a tough situation. On one hand, the Ronin killed his confidant, which is punishable by death. On the other hand, they followed the Bushido code to the end, for which they were praised by the common people. In the end, the shogun allowed the guys to commit ritual suicide, leaving only the youngest alive. But the fate of the majority of samurai was not so romantic. Feudal wars were all over the country, villages were attacked by violent Ronin, and neighboring China and Korea weren't friendly at all. Most often, a samurai died in battle, which was considered an honor for him. But the percentage of deaths was not so great, because, as we've already mentioned, all samurai were well prepared for war and, regardless of the situation, continued training. Life of our Shinji was not sweet, but in comparison to some historical eras, he lived very, very well. We will also live well if you leave a like on this video and suggest other warriors for future analysis in the comments. See you later, friends!